Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to install a TMP line for a 50-gallon electric water heater. So, some tools you're going to need. Torch, solder. I use Coppermate flux, or just flux, sorry, not solder. We have Silver Bright solder. This is actually solder. Brush, sand cloth to clean the pipe, some channel locks, Teflon tape, an inspection tool, kind of mirror, rag for cleaning, copper cutters. We've already installed the water heater. So we started our ball valve on, put in our new flex lines. Now we've screwed in the male adapter here. And we're ready. We're going to take off with a Street 90. We're going to head towards the wall, come over, and then come down over to this pipe. Also, we need a 7/8 escutcheon, which fits over a 3/4 copper pipe. That way it gives it a nice finish. Okay, so the first thing I like to do, also a tape measure. So what we're going to be doing is, so the TMP line is to keep your water heater from essentially blowing up if it gets too hot. So it's regulated at a certain pressure to when it gets too hot, it'll actually open that valve and it'll bring the water to your exterior pipe and you free plumb for it. So what we're trying to do is just run this up the wall like so, and we'll come across on the top. So generally, I'll do one of two things. I'll either put a piece across here, and that way I can get my measurement to here, or I will start right here and kind of just eyeball where I think it's going to be. So it's about 42, and we can always cut that down if we needed to. 41-inch piece here. Let's cut it out for this one. Without banging the walls too much. Take a copper cutter. You can also use a sawzall with a metal blade, or a hacksaw with a metal blade also. Just when you do that, make sure that you clean up the edges so there's not a lot of burrs on it. So anything you do with copper, you want to make sure there's a few things. You want to make sure there's no water in the pipe. You want to make sure it's nice and clean. So use a sand cloth to take off any film or anything on there. And also, copper comes with an enamel on it. We want to scratch that to make sure that that solder is going to stick to it. Same thing with our fittings. I'm going to take a brush or sand cloth and scrape off that enamel. So I'm going to install my 90 up here on top after I've fluxed it. Next, I'll flux this also. And we want this running parallel with the wall. We're just going to kind of pick a spot that looks good and cut our pipe at that spot. When you do this, don't over tighten. Just get it nice and firm. Give it a couple spins. Make sure it's not tracking off to the side one way or the other. Give it a nice little turn again. One more time, and it's off. So with our fitting, we'll be fluxing the inside of that. You don't have to go crazy, flux goes a long ways, but you don't have too little either. So, I'm going to take this next fitting, I'll put it on top here, insert it, make sure we look good. You can take your tape measure, measure at the bottom, 2 inches. Make sure at the top, you're at the same amount of distance. It's nice and parallel with the wall. 2 inches. Then we will take a tape measure and measure across from fitting to fitting. It gives us a 10-inch piece. Take our copper again. Cut off a 10-inch piece. Clean with sandpaper. Also watch your copper. Sometimes they'll have little lines that go through there that will keep your solder from taking. So again, we'll flux it. And prepare to solder. TMP lines need to have gravity, so that water needs to be able to flow down out to the ground. So make sure that's very important. It needs to have gravity from the water heater on the way down. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it does have to have some. All right, so now we're going to solder, and when we're soldering, we use MAP gas. You can use propane, but it's not recommended. It takes a lot longer, and depending on the size of the pipe, it will never get done. We have a turbo torch. Here you can get it in a supply store, or you can get the same equivalent at Home Depot, usually in the welding section. So usually when I'm soldering, I go from bottom to top. Heat rises, I don't know, that's just how I learned. But when you're getting ready to solder the fitting, you want to actually heat up the fitting, not the pipe. So your fitting is thicker, so you want that to get hotter first, and your pipe will just eventually get hot. And when you're heating it, you don't want to be right at the edge here. You want to be down here in the fitting. You want that flux is actually going to suck that solder down into that fitting and create that seal. Okay, like that. Then take your rag, and you can see it when it's still hot. It'll be very shiny, but once it gets, you'll actually see it go dull. That's when you know it's warm enough or cold enough to actually take your rag and clean it up. Now it's important to clean off all that solder and that flux, anything left over, because it will leave a residue.